welcome, Jim. Just for the sake of the audience, I'd love you to kind of introduce yourself and explain how you ended up getting here before we dive in too deep.
Yeah, no problem. And thanks for having me. I like the intro. So we gotta up our game a little bit. So I like that.
Yeah, we at least hope you're growing your own soul, right?
Exactly. Well, my name's Jim Kurtz. I've been in sales and marketing for 20 years now, 25 years, and I came to Harvest Harmonics kind of by accident. I had left a position that I had with another company, and when I was at a networking event, the CEO of our company, Francesco Arlia, he basically said, I raised my hand saying, anybody looking for sales and marketing help, I'm your man. I can help you launch. I can help you get going. And he came up to me and says, how would you like to change the way every man, woman, and child on the planet eats and make them eat healthier or help them eat healthier? And I said, I'm in. So that became the beginning of my story with the Harvest Harmonics.
So before that, what were you've got quite a list of not characters. It's been a long Monday, dude.
A resume? Resume?
Yeah, resume, but experience.
Yeah, so I've been in, I actually have a master's degree in philosophy, which was an amazing subject of study in college, but as you can imagine, was not maybe very practical from a career standpoint. So my stepfather at the time, when I was about 25, said, let me take you under my wing. I'll show you how to sell. And I worked for Cisco Food Service. So I was in food service for probably about 6-7 years. I then went and moved to Texas with my family because California was getting too expensive at that point, unfortunately. So I moved to Texas, and I worked in printing. I worked in energy sales. I worked in just a variety of different fields for the next 5-6 years. Moved to Vermont because we thought we'd be able to build a house, and that turned out to be the place where we were looking at from Texas was like on the top of a mountainside. We're like, okay, this isn't going to work. But worked in retail for a year, and then I came to Clearwater, Florida. Worked for a marketing agency for a couple of years, and then, like I said, I was at a networking event where I found Francesco Arlia, and at the time we called ourselves Organic Earth Tech, but then we rebranded a few years ago because too many farmers thought they had to be organic to use our product. So we rebranded to Harvest Harmonics, and it's just been a great 7 years with this startup, and really just pushing this new technology, this new idea out into the marketplace has been a challenge, but a fun one. So that's kind of
and I meant, again, disciplines. Like you've got permaculture, you've got organics, you've got like all of these other things that are tying into this, like this present position that you're holding. And so what got you into permaculture and food production?
Well, I've always loved growing. We had a garden when I was growing up, so I always liked to grow my own food. In some places I lived, it wasn't real practical, but I always loved to, whenever I could, grow my own greens, grow my own veg, that kind of stuff. And I kind of realized a while ago, my wife is very much into healthy eating, that the food that we're eating really isn't that healthy. The chemicals that they use, the long travel time that it has to take to get from where it's grown to our table, all these different factors that are part of industrial ag are really just kind of, I don't blame the farmers or anybody else. It's just really sort of like I'm just watching the quality of food seem to degrade further and further and further. And so again, when I got the opportunity to work for Frank, I just said, this is my opportunity, really. This is my opportunity to do something, right? Because you can complain about, food's not healthy or it's not that great. But, when you have the opportunity to really get in there and do something and provide something that will help growers, whether they're conventional or organic, regen, permaculture, wherever they fit on that spectrum, we can help because we're actually enhancing the plant's natural genetic ability to grow and produce fruit. So when you can do that, you just tick off so many boxes that fit into all these different categories. And we can really help just about anybody with this technology.
All right, cool. So before we get too deep into the technology, I asked Ken to pull up something so that we can kind of give the audience a demonstration of what we're going to be talking about. So we're going to play this quick little video. Does it have any sound?
The film you're about to see has no characters.
Do you have the sound?
I can hear it.
Yep.
If you spare a little of your imagination, it is a film to describe to you the effect of cymatic frequencies on matter. Everything owes existence solely and completely to sound.
Ken, you can probably kill it there. I mean, we can go on and on with this, but that was the visual that I think we needed to start the conversation. Because this topic is pretty fucking complex. So would you agree that that is probably the simplest way to open the audience's mind as to what we're actually talking about?
You know, the funny thing is we had that when we were at Organic Earth Tech, we had that video on our website. We had that video. There was another one that that went through a lot of the same patterns you saw with the different sand and how it was making different patterns. There's actually a much longer version where it shows at different frequencies, like 20 different frequencies, the different patterns that was created by just different different frequencies that were there. And yeah, we had all that on our website, and communicating that to the general audience I think it really helped explain where the technology was, but from our customer base and who we were trying to communicate to, I don't think it necessarily transcended into, okay, well, how does that increase yield? So we updated that. But there's another one, Dr. Masaru. I can't remember his first name, but Dr. Massaro and his ice crystals, his experiments with that
You
was
mean
another.
Yoda?
Yamamoto.
Thank you.
Yamamoto, yeah, Yamamoto Masaru, and I think we're just really starting to understand the physics of cellular function in biology, and something that the inventor of our technology, Fulvio Balmelli, had been studying with humans for over 30 years, and but it's really now as a science just beginning. We're just discovering how those harmonics, those sonic signals are actually influencing cellular function and biological function, how they're all interrelated. And but that video was a really good kind of visual explanation of the physics of it. Okay, there's physical organizations in nature, right? And if we understand how those organizations take place, we can get a deeper understanding of how the chemical reactions occur within living systems, as well as the biological systems and how they interact. And you can underlie the chemical interactions. You can really get at the physical level. You really get down to the heart of how we can really stimulate plants or stimulate human biology to restore its natural function, without having to go through the via of the chemical or pharmaceutical model, which of course has a lot of side effects, right? You pick up any bottle of a medication and you read the label and it's got more side effects than it cures, right? So that's just because it's not a clean solution to the problem. It is a solution, but it's not a clean solution, where if you can get down to the cellular level, you can really start to handle a lot of these things.
Yeah, and I think by default, it's not supposed to cure. I'm sorry, I'm just going to fucking say it. But that being said, I think it goes a lot deeper than what you just said. When you start to look into horizontal gene transfer, electron donors, electron sharing, all of these things that happen on a cellular level that allows that cell to be super healthy and therefore help its community around it. And I think that, that was the key to this conversation, is that it's biogeochemical interactions, reactions that are really the foundation of life itself. And when you start to wrap into this, some of this more was metaphysical, but it isn't now. I mean, that's hard science. That's been documented. So naysayers can't say, "Oh, this is woo-woo shit." They can't. It's too late in the game for them, anybody to deny what they just witnessed in their eyes. Right. So that being said, let's talk a little bit about the frequencies that you use.
Okay, good. So in his research, so again, Mr. Balmelli, who developed this technology, started with human. He was a medical researcher, right? So he's researched human physiology, and in a lot of ways, the human physiology is more complex, but in other ways, it's not as complex as plant biology. But really, the basis of his technology was founded in the old science of bioresonance, which was something that he started studying. And the whole concept of bioresonance is that biological systems will resonate at a certain frequency. And specifically, he, of course, advanced that much farther. If you look up bioresonance, you'll see a lot of, oh, this is pseudoscience and didn't work, whatever. Mr. Balmelli completely evolved that whole science of bioresonance to a completely new and absolutely workable level. And I won't go into, for the sake of going into getting anybody in trouble, I won't document or tell you all the diseases he's cured, but let's just say he's cured a lot of supposedly incurable diseases with this technology. But the reality is, it has to do with, okay, all your liver cells, for example, they all vibrate at the same frequency. If you really just look at structures within an anatomy, liver, your heart, your lungs, they all have to work together. They all have to communicate to each other for them to serve the greater function of your organ, right? And your organs have to also be aligned to the right timing mechanism for your whole body to function, right? Your cardiovascular system, your blood circulatory system, your muscular system, your bones, all of these systems in your body have to be coordinated and aligned in specific ways for you to maintain your health, especially when you have viruses and bacteria and everything else that's going on, right? In a plant doesn't have the ability to move, but they have the same type of biochemical defenses, right? So they have an insect that attacks it. They have a communication system where they actually can signal to other plants, hey, I'm being attacked. And other plants that are not being attacked will activate their biochemical response, their defenses against insects, right? And this has been well documented by many different trials. But the cells within the plant, the root cells all have to be aligned and timed correctly to really absorb nitrogen and water and nutrients and pull them through the plant to get them to where when the sun hits the plant, now photosynthesis can occur, right? And so all of these processes have to be timed in a specific way for the plant to stay healthy. And as soon as they stop getting timed that way, those frequencies or those timing mechanisms are thrown off because of different stress factors. The efficiency of the plant, the efficiency of the biological systems becomes much less efficient. And that is why farmers are over fertilizing and over spraying and using over watering in a lot of cases. They have to compensate for the plant's inefficiency by giving it a ton more than it could ever use. Unfortunately, that creates other environmental problems, and it gets expensive, which is part of the reason why we're doing what we're doing.
So let's reel it back a little bit. Were you talking originally about the machine that used vibration to cure different diseases? The one that was invented in, I think, the 20s or 30s?
No, there was a machine by a guy named Will Rife, who's probably what you're thinking of.
Rife machine, correct.
Right, and this is not the same type of system. I believe maybe the underlying concepts or the theories might be similar, but the machine that was invented, I believe, was in the 80s. And this is documented on our website too by a man named Hans Brueggemann. And the idea is that, again, certain frequencies, I think Rife used light and light waves at specific frequency patterns, and Brueggemann used sound waves, I believe, or different types of waves. But the idea is that if you hit that right resonance, then you can heal various diseases. And of course, Mr. Valmelli took that to a much deeper level of really understanding how those different systems coordinate and align to each other so that we can find out what the cause of disease is and how to eradicate it.
So just to clear the audience's head, resonance is when everything operates at a similar speed and pace. So you hit, you have a better way to describe resonance?
Yeah, resonance would be, it's when two wave patterns at the same frequency or same number of times per second, let's say. And I'll give you an example of music, right? If you took a guitar and you plucked an E note or a C string, let's say, and a C note would be 440 hertz, let's say, right? If that string is in tune, then when you pluck that string at that right note, you should hear the string will vibrate at that 440 hertz, 440 beats per second, right? If it's not in tune, you can hear the difference and it will sound off. It will sound different, right? So you can take a tuning fork that's already pre-designed to vibrate at that exact frequency. You hit it against the table and then it will start to vibrate. And then you can hear the difference between your note on your guitar, let's say, and your tuning fork. And if those, however, the other side of it is if those two notes or those two frequency patterns are close enough together, then they will automatically go into alignment with each other. So in other words, if my tuning fork says 445 and my string is at 430, they're close enough together that tuning fork will begin to tune naturally the string till it's operating at the same frequency. And the idea is it's called resonance. In other words, those two wave patterns will come into alignment and start to vibrate the same frequency.
Exactly. It's all about vibration. So they align together at a certain point, and there's an energy transfer there as well. So Thank you for clearing that up, because I think that's important, because we're going to be using that word a lot today.
Yeah.
All right, so we've gotten past the Rife machine. I highly suggest the audience that you look into this. Unfortunately, it's just one of so many technologies that have been buried by the elites and not allowed us to use them. But this machine has made it through. So let's talk a little bit more about where your owner actually dialed into what he found as the best vibration for plants.
Right. So in his research, what he did was he's got electrodes where basically he's measuring the energy throughput of a plant, basically. So you can take an electrode on one leaf and an electrode on another leaf, and you can measure through the branches that connect them. You can measure that energy pattern, or in this case, multiple energy patterns. Or you can take one piece of the root and another piece of the root, and you can measure the root is healthy and everything is going fine. You can see that certain energy patterns, and they don't really vary. Now, this took thousands of experiments to find all the energy pattern, or all these different frequency patterns for different cells in the plant or different structures in the plant. And he wound up with a little over 3,000 distinct frequencies that correspond to all these different structures in the plant. And so then he had to develop a whole method of delivering this, because you can't just isolate one frequency for one type of cell. You have to be able to recode and restructure all of the frequencies within the plant more or less simultaneously. So then it became the delivery of what did that timing need to be, so that the frequencies that handle the roots, for example, could restore the roots to their ideal function, and then the ones that were designed for the cells in the leaves, the chloroplasts, let's say, okay, they operated at a different frequency, but you can't just send them in the same molecule of water. There has to be a delivery mechanism that actually can pattern this out, so that it's almost like, I don't know if you ever remember the old Windows. If you ever looked at an old Windows computer, the defrag used to go through it. It used to say, okay, this thing it would replace them, whatever. It would actually show them kind of going through the process and smoothing out, right? And that's essentially what the patterns are doing. They're smoothing out those inefficiencies, or those incorrect frequencies, back to their ideal state. And they just do that again and again and again as the farmer irrigates his crops. That's how our system works. So it's like a continual retuning of all the different frequency patterns within the plant on a constant basis.
So is this sending a signal and receiving one back, or just sending one out?
Just sending it.
Okay.
They get called sensors a lot, but we don't really sense anything. It's a transmitter, so it transmits this programming that has these 3,000 plus frequencies on a constant basis while the farmer is irrigating.
So they're playing all at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. And how the heck did he accomplish that without muting over the whole thing?
My joke in this is years of practice and self-denial. No, but just years of research. Again, because of his experience with the human body and biological systems with the human body, he already had sort of an idea of what to look for and what to do. And then he just had to obviously apply that to his plant physiology. And he had to learn, he essentially almost had to get an agronomic education and understand botany and understand how plants work and really educate himself on the existing knowledge base. And then he had to take his knowledge of biophysics and bioresonance and say, okay, how can I apply this field of knowledge to the existing field of knowledge, so that I can really understand and marry the two for a complete understanding of how the biology actually works.
Interdisciplinary work.
Yeah. Yeah, you need it all. I mean, you can't just be a good physicist and you can't just be a good biologist. You have to, when you're combining those two fields, you have to know both of them very well, obviously.
Right.
Yeah.
I call it being a really good general contractor.
Right.
About the electrician, the plumber, the framer, the roofer, the tile guy, so that you can see if they're doing a good job and you can talk their language, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
All right, so that's where he came from, and that's how he developed this. So can you explain a little bit more to the audience you don't add energy to it. So how are you providing that resonance?
Okay, so this is a very good question, and I'm trying to figure out how to explain it. So we attach these transmitters onto a farmer's irrigation system. And as water travels through the inside of the irrigation pipe, the water, as it flows, carries an electromagnetic charge, right? The other side of that is water has a very unique structure and a very unique set of unique characteristics that no other element on the planet has. And without getting too difficult, I mean, our white paper explains this in excruciating detail, but essentially water has the ability to capture vast amounts of information as it flows through a medium. It's just one of the characteristics of water.
We had Pollock on the show, so we get it.
Get who?
Pollock, Gerald
Okay.
Pollock.
Yeah,
Okay.
Gerald Pollock. Fourth phase
Yeah.
of water.
Yeah, I've heard of his work. So it's essentially the same concept, but this one has to do with, I'm trying to remember even the name of it now. They're called coherence domains. And the idea of a coherence domain is when you have, I'll just use water as the example. So when you have water traveling through a column, right, certain water molecules in the let's say flowing through the center of that column of water is going to move at different speeds and also have different characteristics than water moving at the edges, right, because of turbulence and various things. Well, the idea of a coherence domain is that all the molecules of water, as they flow through this pipe, they're able to essentially shed their electrons, right? They're able to, because of the movement of water and the polar nature of water, they're able to sort of shed their electrons. And in that state, they're able to capture a tremendous amount of information, electromagnetic information. And the transmitters that we are sending, what they are doing is they're activated by that flow of water, by that magnetic field of flowing water. And then the molecules of water in that excited state are able to capture these waves that the transmitters are sending through the pipe and into the water. And those waves have been calibrated and programmed according to set frequency patterns and set timing mechanisms to make sure that each molecule of water can grab essentially a piece of information, right? In this case, electromagnetic wave information. And then when the plants absorb that water at the molecular level, the molecules of water, as they pass through and by the cells within the plant, they're calibrated at a certain frequency, and the plant may be going a little faster, but because of the physical laws of harmonics, they essentially come into alignment with each other and they tune the cells within the plant so that all the cells are now vibrating at the same frequency. And
so you're basically the energy of the water as not only a method for delivery, but you're using as a method for harvesting the energy that you need to install this information and shoot it down the pipe. Very cool, friend. Very cool.
yeah.
So
don't ask me to explain all the physics behind all that, because I don't even know all that necessarily, but that's my understanding.
No, I wouldn't do that to you. All right, so now let's talk about different sizes, because obviously different size pipes are going to require a different amount of conductivity, correct?
Yeah, it actually has to do with the flow rate of water.
So it's the flow rate, okay.
Right. So if you have water traveling through a small pipe going 75 gallons per minute or less, then we can use a single transmitter has enough energy to sort of penetrate through that water as it's moving through and install the signals, for lack of a better word. When you get above 75, then you have to go to 3 or 7 or 9 or up to 12 transmitters that need to be put in a line, almost like a series of batteries, to give the signal enough push to essentially push through the water as it's traveling faster through that pipe.
So in water theory or engineering, we always look at flow and PSI. Does PSI have an effect on your system, or is it just flow that you look?
Just flow rate. Again, it's like if you wanted to use electrical terminology, if you have your voltage would be the push, the electrical push through a wire, right? And then your amperage would be your current, how many electrons is going through that wire. So your electricity is your amperage and your push is your voltage. So with us, the flow rate of water is sort of like how much water is traveling through. But then what we need to do is have enough push from the transmitters to push into that water so it can actually capture that signal. Otherwise, it'll kind of bounce off, almost like if you stick your hand out the window and all of a sudden, when you're driving 60 miles an hour, your hand will go flying back because that push is not strong enough to hold your hand there.
So PSI has no effect.
No.
Interesting. Very interesting. All right. So you use the term 3, 6, 9, and 12 as the units that you need to install based on flow, correct?
3, 7, 9, and 12. It's not linear. So but yeah.
3, 7, 9, and 12. Interesting. I mean, I was just looking at recently, and it's funny, Sil was talking about Tesla, but he considered the answer to all life was 3 and 6 as yin and yang, and 9 as the divine force that allowed life to happen. And so that's why when you keyed in on those numbers, I was like, whoa, this is getting fucking radically deep quick. But instead of 6, he's using 7. And
there's different power levels. We have 7 different power levels of transmitter too. So they're not all necessarily the same single transmitter. They're different power levels that are combined in different ways to achieve the power needed for each flow rate.
So power. So does that mean added circuits or coils? Or again, we haven't even gotten into how you're doing this, but
no, I mean they're essentially, without giving too much away or saying the wrong thing, I would say the best analogy I can give is they're almost like flash charge, like a flash memory stick.
okay.
They're essentially flashed with the programming of Kemenasi, those 3,000 frequency patterns. Are flashed into the transmitter, and then when they're attached, they're able to the electrical conductivity of it's enabling it to get into the thing, and then eventually those transmitters do run out of energy. So they are self-powered, but they're not necessarily like a transistor or a capacitor or something that's holding that charge. It's a different type of technology. And again, some of that's proprietary, and some of that's just stuff that I don't even necessarily know all the physics behind that, but it has the same type of a concept of a flash memory charge.
So you can buy the flash cards in 5, 10, 20, 50, 100 gigabytes, depending on what it is your flow rate requires.
Right.
And do the larger drives still burn out or fry at the same rate as the lower ones?
Yeah. Again, the way it actually works is, when we talk to a farmer, we say, okay, tell us your flow rate, tell us your acreage, like how much you're covering, tell us how often you're irrigating, like how many times per week or month or whatever, how long your irrigation cycle is, how many hours you're irrigating per cycle. And then we figure out the acreage, the total gallons that are likely to go through that system, and then the actual flow rate, which is how fast that water goes through at any given time. So we calculate all of that, and then we custom build the system according to those specifications. We have all of those specifications all lined out. So it's not like you're just going to go to a hardware store and see 10 of our transmitters sitting on a shelf and say, oh, well, I need 5 of these, or I need 6 of these. That's not how it works. They're all custom designed for those specific pieces of information that the farmer gives us.
So if the farmer is overwatering, he's actually using more of this technology than he actually needs, correct? Or is that not?
Yeah, but it doesn't. Again, our technology is not like supercharging anything. Our technology is always just bringing those cellular patterns back to genetic optimum, basically. So you can't necessarily overstimulate with our technology.
Okay.
The only thing you can do is if the farmer is overwatering or if they're over fertilizing, usually is the bigger problem. When they're using way too much fertilizer, because our system makes the plants more efficient, you can actually over fertilize. And we usually recommend most farmers start with about 20% or sometimes 30% less fertilizer so that they don't overstimulate with too much chemical nutrients, because our system is going to make that plant a lot more efficient in how it uses those nutrients. So you don't really necessarily need as much as they're using.
So the only detriment to overwatering is the fact they're going to burn this machine out quicker than they need to.
Yeah, but we usually build them a little bit stronger to make sure that they last, because we guarantee that they last for 2 years, and we take a water sample every 6 months to make sure that but we haven't really ever had a problem with that. So we always overbuild it a little bit just to make sure that the farmers can get that 2-year period out of it.
Got you. So it's interesting that you use all of these parameters, not just the water flow. And why would you tie acreage back into the program, into the formula?
Well, for 2 reasons. One, acreage, even with the same amount of water and everything else, like acreage can affect it. But also from a cost benefit standpoint, we really look at, we decided to price it by the acre or by the hectare instead of by the flow rate or by how many gallons it uses, because a lot of farmers we've contacted, they don't necessarily know off the top of their head what their irrigation line is running, but they know immediately what their cost per acre is, like how much they're spending on an acre per acre basis with their inputs and their seeds and everything else. And so this makes it an easy tie-in, like, okay, your system is 500 an acre, it's 200 an acre, it's whatever it is. I know what my cost is now. If your system really delivers a 30% increase in yield, like you say it does, I should be paying for your system plus making X amount of dollars more, and it's an easy calculation for them. So we have the acres for a pricing standpoint, but also so we know, okay, because in some cases we have a farmer or a greenhouse guy that's using like 300 gallons a minute, but his greenhouse is only like half an acre. But he might have a ton more plants and like more closely packed in that greenhouse than he would if he grew it in the field. So we take those things into consideration also.
Interesting. For you to actually get the farmer to talk about cost per acre, that's friggin' huge. Every time I deal with a farmer, it's all about yield per acre. Like I say to them, oh yeah, that's great. You got 200 bushel per acre, but what did that cost you? And as soon as you say that, they shut down. It's like, oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm like, well, yeah, it does, because say you only got 100 bushel per acre, but you spent 1/10 of what you did to get 200 bushels per acre. That means you made 90% more profit. And obviously you had less work. So there's savings in labor, there's savings in diesel fuel, there's savings in everything. And so I'm like astounded, because I've been fighting that wall with these farmers for years, because they just, I don't know whether it's the ego that's getting them, but they'll never take into consideration cost per bushel. They'll only take into consideration bushel per acre. So someday we're going to have to talk about your methodology, because if I can crack that fucking code, I could light up the fucking, the corn farmers, because right now they're so focused on, oh, I gotta be 200 acres per bushel, bushel per acre. And it just, I don't know, it frustrates me, because they could be making so much more money and they can get away from these fucking synthetics if they would just take that into consideration.
A couple of farmers that because I asked them about that, a couple of farmers that wouldn't talk about that. I said, so what is the big secret? Just curious. And he said, or why wouldn't that be attractive to you, is the question I asked. And he said, well, it's because I have a lot of fixed costs. Like I have a $500,000 combine that I'm making payments on. And it's like, okay, I might save money on my input cost or my seed cost, right? Or my fertilizer, or whatever cost, that would be great. But if I cut my yield from 200 to 100, now I've got, in their mind, like I don't have enough money to make my tractor payment or my other payment, So I don't know if how real that could be, but that might be their consideration on some of that stuff. So,
and I tried that approach too, but again, hit a brick wall, because they just don't get a penny saved as a penny earned. That's the brick wall that I hit constantly. Is like, no, you're still making more money. You're making way more money, So it doesn't matter that you have a fixed asset or a fixed cost. You're still making more money, period. Right. And so, yeah, if you got any other suggestions on how to crack that code, I'd love to hear, because, that's always been the biggest problem with, well, first of all, organic fertilizers don't work. Well, they do work if you have biological. If you don't have any biology, then no, it's just going to sit there on the surface of the soil and not do shit. So that's a huge leap to get over first. But then to get them to start looking at cost per bushel is just been a nightmare.
I tended also to stay away from the cost side, because just the point of fact, the cost of my technology is not cheap. It's not I always tell people, it's not a $50 an acre fertilizer. It's just not, So if that's what you're looking for, like, this conversation will be very short, because that's just not what I am. I'm about, how do you maximize the efficiency of your whole operation? How do you reduce your input costs? Yes, but how do you also maximize your yield, and how do you get better quality? Again, a corn farmer that's just throwing it into a silo or selling it for feed, and he's not getting any more money necessarily if it's great quality or less quality, probably doesn't care from an economic standpoint, And I kind of sometimes say, well, that you guys are not my customer, but you should be, and you will be eventually, So sometimes I just let those guys keep doing what they're doing. I don't make them wrong, or don't tell them, whatever. But it's just like, I'm looking for the guy who can see the future, can see the need for change, and wants help getting there. Right. That's my
guy. And I agree with you. That's generally been the place that I've been forced into, is just like, okay, there's believers and there's non-believers. If they're a non-believer, next, go on, keep looking for those believers that are willing to break the mold and trust that there is something way better than the synthetic version.
Right.
All right. So is there a way for you to talk about per acre for this technology, or is that solely dependent on all these other factors?
No. Okay. So we really have two basic pricing models. Well, our pricing model is a little bit complex, only because we have to account for exchange rate. When we go international, we have to account for exchange rates, and we go to Pakistan, and it's like, okay, we almost can't even sell there. There's a few countries like that where the economy is so bad, like that unless we get government assistance, there's no way nobody's going to be able to afford it. But here in America, like, our standard pricing would be somewhere like $200 an acre for corn or soybeans or wheat, the commodity broad acre type crops. And we do more like $500 an acre for specialty crops. And really the real cost is $500 an acre, but we know we're not going to sell any corn guys for $500 an acre. It's just not going to happen. So we've kind of made that concession and said, okay, well, if we can make like this much profit on a corn guy that get 1,000 acres, it would be worth it, right? Versus, okay, I can make a decent profit, on a grape guy or a pepper guy or a tomato guy, but knowing that guy is going to get a lot more profit, because if I increase his yield by 20%, he's making 10,000, 20,000 an acre. He's not worried about the 500 he's paying me, right? But a corn guy, that if I get him at 20%, that might only be 300 an acre, 400 an acre, right? So that might be, you're spending 200 to get 300. Still a benefit, but not necessarily like the eye-opening, oh my God, I'm going to make a ton more money with this, right?
Right. So it's market driven or crop driven, crop specific.
Yeah.
So roughly 200, 500 an acre is a safe place to kind of guesstimate whether you want to get involved in this.
Yeah. And then, like I said, if we're in another country, I mean, we'll work with the farmer as long as it makes sense for us. I'm more interested in that the farmer gets it, they see it, they measure things, and they actually see the benefits and results. Because once they see that, then they're sold. I mean, that's what's going to sell them. And if I have to do a little wheeling and dealing just to get them to try it, that's fine. Does that mean I'm going to give it at $30 an acre or give it away for free? No, I can't do that. I'm just not, and I'm not going to, because every time I'm giving it for free, the farmer just puts it on a field somewhere, forgets all about it, and then comes back to me at the end. Well, I didn't see a difference. Well, did you look? No. Did you measure? No. Did you have anything at all? No. I just didn't see Meanwhile, that corn has been mixed in with everything else, and it's like, okay, they probably got a 25% difference in yield, and they just didn't see it because they have 1,000 acres, right? So,
I
at
know
least if I
that.
have a little skin in the game, at least then I know that they have an incentive to at least pay attention to it, right? So,
Dude, I've had that same problem for years. I gave away product. I'd see him a year later, whatever, and say, "Hey, how did it work out for you?" "Oh, what are you talking about?" I said, "Remember that product I gave you?" "Oh shit, I put that in the garage. I forgot all about it."
that's even worse. They didn't even use it at all. Oh, it's still on my desk over there. What?
Yep.
You have a $20,000 piece of equipment that's sitting on your desk, collecting dust. Thanks. But
Yeah. So I totally.
that's on us. We learned our lesson.
Yeah. I totally get that. If you force them to put some skin in the game, they will be financially responsible with the gift that you gave them.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So at that cost, is that an annual cost or is that every other year?
Every other year. So our systems last for 2 years. So essentially it's $100 per acre per year for the broadacre commodity crops, wheat, corn, soy, barley, those types of things, grains, or it would be alfalfa, feed, that kind of stuff, or $250 an acre per year for what we call specialty crops like strawberries, tomatoes, peppers, lettuce, the types of where there's usually smaller acreage, but they're a lot more value per acre for those crops.
And a lot more intensive farming too.
Yeah.
All right. So when you set up your financial structure, do you say to them, "Hey, this is going to last 2 years. Pay us this the first year, this the second year," or is everything up front?
Usually everything's up front, but sometimes if they're willing to do a fairly large order, we'll work out a deal where we call it our memorandum of understanding, where we basically say, okay, good. If you're willing to do these 5 tests, like give us a soil test, give us a leaf test, like a sap analysis or something, give us a yield differential, obviously, on that field versus others, to give us a quality measurement. And, if there's another specific thing that's important to them, just give us 5 or 6 easy to measure things that you're probably measuring anyway. Just give us the data on those. And then we'll work out a payment plan where we'll split it in half. Like you pay 50% deposit and then you run it. And then at the end of that year, once we look at all that data that you gave us, assuming we give you a good result like we're expecting, then you pay us the second half and you run it for a second year. If we don't, if we're looking at the numbers and you really measured and used everything correctly, and for some reason, they just didn't see the results that first year, obviously our team is going to work with their team to figure it out and figure out what's going on. But in the meantime, we'll hold that second payment until the end of the second year so we can make sure that you're winning as a farmer.
Got you. So you actually give them a buffer, which is great. That's a great business model.
That way they got some skin in the game, they got some commitment, but also we're willing to work with them too. Like we want the whole contract, not just the 50%. So we're going to work with their team to make sure they get the good result that they should.
Fantastic. I love the approach. Very flexible. And it's good for both parties. It gives them trust in you that you're there to support them, even if they do make mistakes, which, happen, right? Shit happens. So maybe the yield's due to they didn't fertilize the same way they fertilized the year before, or the weather completely changed and they fertilized and it rained right after it and washed everything out. Well, then you're not going to get the yield. So therefore, let's figure out why that happened. And obviously then you step back in and your team goes, "Hey, look at the data. This is what happened." That the sap crashed. So of course the plant went into shock and didn't friggin' move.
Right.
So that's a great business model. All right. So in a greater understanding of perhaps how this is also affecting, like you said, the level of fertility. How do you explain that to the farmer? You just say, "Hey, look, you've got to cut back your fertilizer 30% in the first year," or how does that work? Because you're asking them to kind of jump off a cliff at that point.
Yes and no. I mean, usually and if you really ask a farmer and he's really in good communication with you, they'll tell you, like, every farmer over fertilizes, better to be safe than sorry kind of an approach, right? And I talked to a strawberry grower that had our tech on his field, and he told us that. He says, they kind of he goes by his hunch, but he knows he probably puts way too much fertilizer there that the plants don't need, but he just wanted, it's better to do that than to under fertilize and then have to play catch up. That was his words. But the way I usually approach it is like ask him, okay, are you putting a dry fertilizer on in the beginning and that's the only fertilizer you're doing? Okay, well, maybe you don't cut your fertilizer. But in general, what happens is they put a dry fertilizer down before, and then they fertigate through the season. They put fertilizer through the irrigation through the season. And I'll say, okay, look, how often do you irrigate? And they say like 3 times a week. Okay, great, for 3 hours, let's say. And I say, good, how often during that irrigation cycle are you putting fertilizer in? They'll say like, I do an hour and a half. Okay, good. So what I want you to do is keep your same schedule and everything else, but instead of an hour and a half, I just want you to go down to an hour. So you're still getting fertilizer to the plants in the same regimen you're doing, you're just doing it for half an hour less time. Or if it's like a pivot that would mean that but this part's not getting anything. I might say, okay, good. So can you reduce the flow of fertilizer? So instead of running, a ton of fertilizer, you run maybe, 3/4 of a ton or something like that. So you drip it a little bit more sparsely. And most farmers are willing to do that kind of a test. Some farmers aren't. And those ones we just say, okay, we're just going to run your standard program against a standard program, and we're going to pay attention to it and see if that you're over fertilizing might be causing our system not to perform the way it should,
And then in that scenario, though, I mean, that's a difficult scenario because you have to go back to the farmer and say, hey, you fucked up. I told you to cut the fertilizer back and you didn't, and we didn't get the response. I mean, that's kind of like probably a problematic issue with you guys.
It can be, but we never point the finger at the farmer. We're more like a proactive type of approach. I mean, usually what we do is we'll tell the farmer like, okay, what you really need is a microbial or biological amendment, and that's going to actually reduce your need for fertilizer. So if you don't want to do 20% less with my technology, we want you to do 40%. Or what we'll usually do is say, okay, let's say you have 1,000 acres. You have your corn farmer, you have 10 pivots, right? Okay, we want to take 1 pivot. Good. And that 1 pivot with 20% less fertilizer, you have to understand you might be risking losing 10%. You might lose 10 bushels on that pivot, right? Is that something you're willing to risk given the size of your operation? And most farmers will say, I'm not real happy about it. Like, okay, are you willing to risk 10 bushels to get 30 bushels or 40 bushels? And they'll say, yeah. I said, okay, let's run it then. It's every situation's unique in that sense. So not every farmer goes for it, and I tried my best not to point the finger at the farmer and say, you messed up, but I know what my technology does. We've done university trials and, this is what they did. We did a university trial where they didn't put any fertilizer on there and only used half as much water as they normally would use. Our system still had 2 full-size ears per stalk, and the other ones had 2 of the little tiny, half ears, But no farmer is ever going to not fertilize at all. But that was just an illustration of what our technology can do.
Interesting. All right. Does water quality have any issues with what you're doing? Like if you had a high chlorine
It'll obviously affect the plant. I mean, it won't affect how our system works. We haven't really run into anything where high salinity or iron or anything else creates a problem for how our technology works. The signals still show up. It's perfectly fine. Obviously, if we have poor quality water, that will affect your production anyway, just because the plants need relatively clean water. If anything, our technology usually mitigates those negative effects that you normally see. Doesn't
really? So it offsets the fact that you've got poor quality water.
Yeah, to some degree. It makes the plants more resilient to the negative effects you'd normally see.
Gotcha.
Biofilm,
can that dissonate the ability for your equipment to put out the signal?
We haven't really noticed a big problem. Obviously, biofilm can have its own issues, like I said, but it's not going to affect how our technology works. But our system doesn't really handle biofilm positively or negatively. It's just a fact. I mean, but it doesn't hurt how our technology works.
Interesting, because I was reading this morning. I was trying to, well, I almost told Ken about better understanding electronic transfer through external polymer substances. So basically what this is the biofilm on the outside of the cell. And there's a couple different ways that electrons can transfer. One is direct cellular contact, and the other is called tunneling, which is basically bouncing the electron through the biofilm to the surface where it can directly transfer. And so that's why I asked that question, because, you know, the food or the previous thought was, oh, fuck, you know, those biofilms fuck up the ability for that cell to transfer or steal or donate electrons. And then the reality of the fact is, you know, based on that paper, no, that's not true. It just happens a different way. There's not a loss of signal. There's not a length of time that prevented it. It's just a different pathway. So that's why I asked, because you're vibration, not electron. And so, and I may be wrong on this, but I think it's proton is the source of vibration. That might be too deep off the charts.
Well, I will say this. It's been discovered that the signaling system of the cellular structure in a biological system happens through the fascia, and it happens almost at the speed of light. So it's not even an electron transfer. It's a signaling system that operates at a photonic level, not even an electron. Electron is not the same as a photon.
Yep.
And so a signal can travel through photonic transfer when the cells are aligned. So again, if the cells are misaligned, that photon is not going to necessarily transfer the way it should. When they're all aligned, that photonic communication network within the biological system will happen almost instantaneously.
And again, it's photonic, not protonic.
Yeah, right. So a photon is a piece of energy, the light energy that gets released when, usually when either a neutron splits into a proton and electron, it'll be a photon of energy. That's the nuclear power reaction, where the photons become the energy particles that are released. Can also be through a biochemical process or a biophysical process, but that's the energy that's released. That's the photon.
Perfect. Great explanation. Because that's, you know, again, it's people get confused between photons, protons, electrons. You know?
Right.
And then down all the way to the subatomics, which gets really fucking wild. But we're not going there today. So you basically explained that there is very little that can disrupt this process. Is there anything that I've missed that can disrupt your technology?
Yeah, there's certain we haven't identified all of them yet, but there are certain chemicals that do seem to nullify or make our system either inactive or less effective. Glyphosate seems to be one, unfortunately, with all the corn farmers using it still. We've noticed corn farmers telling us that they were seeing the best year they've ever seen. You know, the plants looked greener, they were healthier. He was looking forward to an amazing season. And then they crop dusted his field in addition to his neighbor's fields with glyphosate, and it just froze everything, froze his whole field. And so basically, like, it just withered. And I think he's still going to get a crop, but it's going to be nothing like what he was expecting before that happened. And our system is just not enough because he didn't have Roundup Ready corn. So, of course, it killed. I had another farmer that was growing alfalfa, and he planted millet. And he said it came through, his guy came through and sprayed a few days later. Well, normally he can get away with that with an herbicide, because normally the seeds do not sprout quick enough to where they emerge out of the soil, right? With our system, we increase that germination speed, so the seeds actually germinated and emerged out of the soil faster than they normally did. And so when this guy sprayed with herbicide, it basically killed half of the seeds that he had on our treated area.
Yeah.
So, and he was just like, I'm like, well, I guess our system worked. Unfortunately for you, it didn't produce a good result for you, because we didn't know you were going to spray a couple days after. Like that wasn't. So certain pesticides, herbicides, and certain even chemical fertilizer seems to nullify our system, and we're still in the process of identifying what those are. So far, no organic or no natural, biological or fertilizer, anything like that, seems to affect our technology. But definitely some of the conventional stuff can.
Is the conventional fertilizers? Can you, or do you even know? Is it the nitrate or the ammonia? Or
We don't even know. But the reality is, it's usually only when it's in the fertigation system. So if it's that's why one of the reasons why also we say if you have a 2-hour irrigation cycle, then give us an hour where you're just running plain water through it, right? Because that hour is going to capture our signals and give the plants a chance to absorb the water with those signals in it, and that in turn will give it a pure signal and a pure. Once it's in the soil, we don't seem to have as much problem with the chemicals because once we're mixing with the soil and the microbiology and everything, the plants will get our signals just fine, and they get a benefit. It's when the chemical is being delivered through the irrigation line that it seems to be. I think it's just a harmonic signal where we have a very strong signal doing a wave like that, and then our signal is doing the opposite wave like that. It's like noise canceling headphones. It cancels our signals, and then they're essentially nullified.
very cool. So then it really has to be run on pure water. Cannot be adding anything. Or you did say that it's all right with organic fertilizer, so like humic acids or any of these other alternative solutions to synthetics. But
yeah, we haven't really noticed any problem with those, so that seems fine.
All right, before we get too far down the organic rabbit hole that I can't wait to go down, how many different countries are you in at this point?
I lost count. I think we're in 45 or 46 countries with active farms, and then we also have researchers with universities or governments, probably in another 5 or 6. So we're besides the ones we're already in with the farm. So we're probably in 50 countries now, between research and actual commercial farms using it.
What is the volume in the U.S. that you have as far as clients?
I think we have about 120, 150, somewhere in that range, customers right now.
They spread all over the U.S. or are they pocketed?
Well, obviously, so our system requires an irrigation line. So the areas where the farmers don't irrigate, like the Midwest, big areas in the Midwest and the Northeast, a lot of those farmers don't even irrigate. So there's a couple that are using it on sprayers, but for the most part, we really just can't help them until we get a version that doesn't require irrigation lines. But everywhere else, we seem to be in good shapes.
So people have actually taken this technology and added them to spray tanks?
Yeah, what they do is they take if they have a tractor with a sprayer on it, like they're doing a spray, they'll either, when they're loading the tank, they'll either like put our system and run the water through our line as they're loading the tank, or they'll sometimes take one of our smaller units and attach it to the booms where the water's traveling out as it sprays, and they'll just spray plain water through our system, and then that will spray it as a foliar on the crops. The only downside with that is our system, to be really effective, should be applied at least once a week, because after that the signal degrades. And so a lot of the farmers that are dryland guys, they just spray once or twice a year, which is again why we haven't really penetrated that side of the market, because there's I don't want to sell anybody something if they're only going to spray it one time. I mean, they're not going to see a significant enough difference to be worth their while, I would think. So I just say, no, just wait till we get a non-irrigating system for you guys.
Very interesting. So the signal has to be recharged once a week.
Yeah, because just like everything else, it'll attenuate. It'll start to reduce, right? So
how bad is the bell curve? Is it like really drastic, or is it just like it slowly tapers off? Like if you miss a week or two.
I'm just going by what we see. I mean, like I said, we have farmers that are using it every other week that say they're still seeing some good results. It just seems to be that the farmers are irrigating once or twice a week. They always seem to say that they're getting the best results. And so from that we extrapolate that it's probably about 5 to 10 days, depending on the environmental conditions. But it's almost impossible for us to narrow down all those different variables to really tell you, okay, in 5 days you're going to go like that, or you're more like 7 days. it's really difficult to pin it down like that because of all the variables that are involved. So.
All right. Does rain affect it?
No. Rain will actually spread the signal. So, it actually doesn't even dilute it because there'll be enough signals within the water or that irrigation water that now it can flow and become more. Rain will actually break apart the soil and allow all the water to be more modal through the soil, and that actually helps our technology.
Increases capacity. That would make sense.
Right.
So the opposite must be true as well in a very, very drought condition where you're applying this, you're going to lose some benefit because of the water being pulled out of the soil. No?
In theory, I mean, if it's really hot, and obviously if it's really hot and the water is evaporating before the plants can absorb it, then yeah, that would be true. But we have several instances in droughts where our technology is actually increasing yield, where in other areas in the same area, other plantations are decreasing the yield by 30 or 40%. We're actually increasing yield because when the plants can get the water at all with our signals in it, it's making them more efficient in how they use water. So yeah, obviously if it's in a drought and you're irrigating over here and then the water never gets to the plant, then yes, of course, yeah, it's not going to be effective.
Is it more important to get the water foliarly or soil wise, or it doesn't matter?
It doesn't really matter. I mean, obviously the plants absorb most of their water through the root system, so that's usually what we recommend, but it doesn't really matter if it's overhead or in the soil, either way.
Gotcha. Well, that was kind of where I was going with that. Was do the pivots as effective as the tubing or the drip lines.
Yeah. We've had good results with sprinklers and microjets and overheads and pivots, and we've had good results with drip irrigation and subsurface also. So it doesn't matter.
So you've covered all the bases there, my friends. Well done. Well done.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go down the rabbit hole of synthetic versus organic practices. Do you see a difference there?
Yeah. Here's the thing with synthetics, and I'm sure you know this, and maybe your listeners know this also, but the thing with synthetics is they provide the nutrients that the plant needs, right? But because most synthetics have to increase the pH or the electrical conductivity in the soil, they have to increase it for the plants to be able to absorb it. They actually, in that process, they actually reduce microbial activity.
Yep.
And they cause the microbes to go dormant. Or in some cases, if it's really bad, they'll actually kill off some of the microbiology of the soil. And so, yes, you're giving the plants the nutrients they need with synthetics, but you're also decreasing nature's fertilizer, which is done through the absorption through the biology in the soil of natural nitrogens from the air and converting it into usable forms for the plant. Same thing with carbon dioxide. A lot of the carbon that's sequestered in the soil comes from microbiology. So when you use synthetics and that's killing or making the microbes dormant, it's actually cutting off nature's natural way of getting these minerals and nutrients to the plant. So that becomes like a dwindling spiral where you keep having to use more and more synthetics to get less and less result over time because you're ruining the microbial activity in the soil. And I know some farmers are starting to incorporate biologicals to sort of rebalance it. But if you're still using the synthetics and you're using the biologicals, it's just like pouring money in the garbage can. It's like you're counteracting what you're trying to do. So contrast that with organic fertilizer like chicken manure, cow manure, or certain other organics, humic acid, fulvic acid. A lot of those compounds not only feed the plants with the nutrients that they need, but they also provide microbial activity to keep that internal soil microbiology balanced. And it's the balance that's important. It's not just having a lot of microbes, it's having a good balance where the predatory microbes are being kept in check with the beneficial microbes, and it becomes like its own ecosystem. If you can keep that ecosystem in a good range, then the plants will do most of what you want them to do. So
before I go further on that question, organic matter, how does organic matter affect? Is high OM a good thing or a bad thing with your product?
It's just good in general for the plants to have good organic matter. If you have very sandy soils with very little organic matter, the problem with low organic matter is, again, the microbial populations will tend to be sparse, and because they need certain things to survive, and part of that's organic matter that they're using for food and breaking down. And so if you don't have organic matter in the soil, then that microbial population will be low. And it's going to be more challenging for the plants to get the nutrients they need unless you're literally spoon feeding the plants directly with fertilizer, that kind of thing. So it doesn't really affect how our technology works in terms of boosting the photosynthesis in the plant, but it does obviously affect the overall plant production, just as a matter of course.
And the reason I went down that rabbit hole was just was if you water in a sandy soil, you're going to lose a lot of that water really quickly. Whereas if you have a high organic matter, that organic matter is going to hold that stuff like a sponge, and therefore give the plant a longer time to pull the signal out of it. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah. We have seen evidence that our system does improve water retention in sandy soils. So I'm not sure exactly why that is, unless it's just, I think there are signals in our system that actually improves soil structure to help maybe some of that sandy soil retain some more of that moisture. Exactly how that works or why that works, again, I don't know all the physics behind it, but that's been my observation when I look at some of the reports.
Very interesting, because the reason I went down that rabbit hole is because in the process that I do, I take compost and I strip it to get all of the things that I want. So that's the microorganisms, the humic fulvic acids, and all of the micro, what we call remineralized material out of it. And then through the next process, I call it, climatic dewatering. So I use vibration to shake the water out of the matrix. And I've noticed that when I find the sweet spot in the vibration, just like we saw on the sand in the beginning, the water falls out of the material. So if I'm on a higher vibration or a lower vibration, it tends to drip. But when I get to that, that resonance, it just drops out. And so in my early experiments, I was brought in to deal with engineered soil systems. So engineered soil systems are 99% sand, 1% organic. And the reason why is because it's very important for them to maintain their structural effectiveness. So it'd be like walking on a putting green and sinking. Your feet sink. No, that's not going to work. A playing field, a sports field where your cleats sink as you turn, you're going to have a lot of leg injuries, et cetera, et cetera. So the work that was being done in a lot of places was because the town, city, state, government, whoever, required that this field be managed organically and not allow synthetic fertilizers for whatever reason. So in the early work, we could not get protozoa or fungi, or the gentleman that hired me could not get protozoa or fungi to take hold in these low ORM soils. And so Elaine told him, Dr. Elaine told him, hey, see Leighton up at April's greenhouse. He's doing some work that I think is going to solve your problem. So Sotillo came up, we looked at, microscope my shit, and was like, oh my God, how did you get this? What is this? And I said, well, it's basically kind of like biological mayonnaise, for lack of better words. I've noticed that it really sticks to things. And I created applying this stuff to sand, pure sand, no ORM, and it turns the top 6-8 inches into what I want to call chocolate sand. And I go, once that happens, then we see the ability for fungi to come in and start to set up and create aggregates without destroying the structural property of the sand. Once the aggregates are created, then the protozoa can take hold and begin the nutrient cycling system. So I didn't understand why it did that, why it bonded the sand and allowed for aggregates in a sandy soil. But it was later on in life, probably only 5 or 6 years ago, that I realized, fuck, it's the kymatics, it's the vibration that's forcing these things to bond together that allows for that next step. So that's why I asked that question, is because in my brain, my hypothesis was that, yeah, through what you're doing, it would turn a sandy soil, or give sandy soil the ability to aggregate without OM. So that's really cool.
I think that's probably true. Again, when I asked Fulvio, the inventor, I said, "So what's the deal here?" Because originally we thought that we had certain frequencies within our system that directly boost microbial activity in soil. That we're actually boosting the reproduction and the function of microbes in the soil directly with our frequencies. And he said, no, it's more like we're improving the soil structure to give them a better environment to survive. And then obviously by boosting photosynthesis, you create more of an exit base that feeds the microbes from the plant and keeps them fed so that they start to wake up and they start to do their activity the way they're supposed to.
And also, you're building the cell's ability to create biofilm, and that biofilm is actually what's bonding those particles or assisting in managing the bonded particles. So when you add biofilm to two particles, now they're glue. So long term, it's more less susceptible to damage, so to say, and that would make total sense. And that's kind of where I wanted to go next. Is that is this a biological food too? Are you stimulating something else in the biology, or is that something too far down the rabbit hole?
You mean soil biology?
Yes.
Yeah, like I said, my understanding now, from after I was corrected by the inventor, was that we are not directly stimulating the microbial functions of the soil microbes. What we're doing is improving the soil structure from a climatic standpoint, as well as improving the photosynthesis efficiency, which causes the plant to generate enough sugar that they can actually donate more of that to the soil microbial population, which is part of the natural process, right? The plants are feeding the microbes so that the microbes can go out and find the nutrients that plant needs in the soil and become that symbiotic relationship, right? When you over fertilize the plant and it gets everything that it needs because we're fertilizing it, we're artificially providing that, and we're increasing the electrical conductivity of the soil and the salinity of the soil, which makes the microbes more dormant. The microbes, all of a sudden, they're deprived of their natural function, right? So now they go into dormancy or they even die, and then you have a dead soil, essentially. Where if you use an organic natural fertilizer with our technology, we're boosting the plant's natural photosynthesis and keeping that natural ecosystem, that symbiotic relationship with the microbes and the plants going.
Have you ever tested that theory, like that you're definitely not affecting the microbes? Like, have you ever taken the system in a natural system, something that's never been fertilized, right, and test and control and view the soil ecology after a period of time?
We haven't done that. I mean, we've done microbial tests on certain farms. We've done it. We haven't done that in an unfertilized natural environment, at least not to my knowledge. Maybe Mr. Bamelli has. I don't know. But it'd be very interesting to run that experiment.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, it would. And I would please ask you to talk to him about just that, because in my mind, I believe that it perhaps isn't directly adding advantage to the microbe, but the other half of me says it would have to. By increasing the kymatics of a cell, you would tend to think that you put it in a better position for its function as well, right? But again, the only way to really test that would be to do side-by-side test and control in a system, a natural system, whether it's a landscape or anything that's just not being fertilized, something that was forest or meadow. But that would be a really, really interesting experiment.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
All right, so.
And we do have some slides, Leighton, in case Jim wants to go to them. Just let me know, Jim.
Yeah, definitely. Why don't you go ahead and pull up the slides? And I've noticed there hasn't been many questions, Ken, which I find kind of amazing.
I think everybody's amazed at the conversation. I know I am, and I really appreciate this, Jim, because this is some amazing technology, and I'm just letting it float through my brain. How can I use this?
Well, I hope so. No, but It was interesting. I was watching a show about the pyramids and how they used sonic technology to build the pyramids. This was just, I was just interested in it, you know, right? And the theorist was describing how they were using the pyramids as like a sonic resonator to basically move these huge blocks of stone, and how that was how they actually got built, as opposed to pulleys or, you know, using millions of tons of rock. They're just using this kind of vibrational technology to get it to. I was like, that would be really fascinating. And I think that's, I've been seeing comments like, this is amazing, this is fascinating.
Where did you see that?
Well, there's a couple of different, one YouTube channel was called Y-Files. They have a lot of this kind of stuff, but then there's also, I think, the History Channel, or I don't know. There's stuff on YouTube. You can go and search like sonic technology built the pyramids or something, and see all kinds of stuff, you know. And I'll leave it to if you want to believe it or not. But I thought it was just fascinating. Just even the theory of it was kind of interesting. So
yeah, I'm as architect, engineer, builder, so I'm always interested in the different theories on how they did it. And there were some using floating technology or water technology. By water displacement, you could move these huge boulders up and down mountains. Yeah, there's definitely something that, again, we're not being allowed to understand. Some of these older technologies that allowed humans to do what we can't even do today. You know, like the stones in Peru and stuff they're just so big. Our cranes can't even move them, let alone join them, so you can't get a piece of paper in between. So there's definitely more out there than we're being exposed to. So, all right, why don't you go ahead and pull up the slides, and go ahead and go through them.
yeah, so this one was this one was one of our first experiments we did when we were actually right after we launched. We launched at the end of 2019, and then literally as we just started to get some of these trials going, COVID hit, and then everything was shut down. So it was kind of a bummer. But this one was done on tangerine seedlings. They were about 3 months old, I think, when we started, and we watered them for 26 days, not even a full month. And you can see the difference in the slide. I mean, the picture on the right that was treated, the plants were open. They were all the yellow. You see a lot of yellow on the very top and on the side. That's all new growth. That's like new branch growth. So you can see it was just really flourishing versus the untreated in that same time period. Hadn't even opened its leaves yet. So we're estimating about a 30 to 40% faster growth rate on those seedlings. In one of our earliest experiments there. Was pretty interesting.
Is that also true with fruiting? Or is it
typically, yeah. We kind of look at it this way. We make the plant more efficient, and the plant decides how much of that goes to vegetative and how much of that goes to fruit or reproduction. And that has come up with some of our grape farmers and other guys. They're worried that it's just going to grow out of control but not produce more fruit. But typically we say if you have to induce a stress event by not irrigating for a few extra days, then you can do that. But we haven't really noticed a big problem generally with lack of production. So
have you worked with any cannabis growers?
We will not work with any drug crop growers. So if it's got THC in it, we will not sell our product or work with them in any way. If they're a non-medical or a commercial hemp grower, for example, they grow CBD or they grow for the fiber, we can work with those guys because it's low THC. But it's our company policy. We don't work with any crops that have psychoactive substances that can be used for, mind altering things. So no heroin growers, no pot growers. Sorry.
That's all right. So have you done any work with hemp growers? Oh shit.
We've been trying for a long time to get. It was very interesting. Right before we were launching, we had a lot of hemp growers that were super interesting, and they said, "We want it." And then right as we launched, I think something happened to the market because I've been hearing people say that the market just crashed. Yeah. And so all of our people that were interested all of a sudden said, "Nah, we're going to wait." And they're all in kind of a turmoil right now. But I'm still very interested in working with some hemp growers just to find out what the difference would be.
Well, the reason I asked that is because their need to flip the plant to get the flower production it would be interesting to see if this product was counteractive toward that flower expansion. I guess time will tell when you get your first hemp client.
Yeah, we'll have to just see. I mean, again, if any hemp growers are out there, and again, it's commercial hemp, non-THC, we're happy to work with you. We'd love to work with you and show you what we can do.
All right, so back to this.
So this was an interesting one because this was in Peru, again, one of our earlier experiments. But this particular farm had been trying to grow cherry trees. They were actually mostly citrus and then vegetables, but they tried to grow cherry trees for like 4 years in a row, and they were never successful. They had a whole team of scientists, and they just could never get the cherry trees off the ground. And we said, okay, let's go in there. And you see where we started on the left here in December 2019. Just 1 month later, we were all like, I think they're about 6 months or a year old seedlings with no foliage. After 1 month, the difference between the untreated and treated was huge. The untreated had just a few leaves and like 1 or 2 branches. Our system already had multiple branches and was already growing very well. And then the one 4 months later from beginning, you see the untreated had about 4 or 5 branches, still very sparse, almost just not really taking off. And our trees had already started developing a canopy. I mean, it was the first time they were able to get a successful cherry crop going.
Synthetically fertilized or organic?
I can't remember. I think this was synthetic. I don't think this was an organic grow. I think they had a very poor soil quality, which is the reason they weren't successful prior to using us. I think they had just a very poor soil, and we were able to help the trees counteract that enough to get them rolling.
So are you still in touch with those cherry growers?
No, actually, we've been trying to get back a hold of them because when we were running our early experiments, we had a sister company called Organica Latam, and they were running all of our South American operations. They were doing a great job at first, and then they just decided they wanted to do something else. There was some kind of upset or something like that, and so they gave up the entire business. And we've been trying to get back in touch with those growers again because they just literally left. They said, okay, bye. And so we had to go back in and find. They didn't have records of their phone number, who we could contact. We had to go back in, and we did contact probably about 10 or 15 of them, but I don't know if that was one of the growers able to reach yet.
Because that would be a really great.
That was disappointing.
Yeah, that would be a really great way to answer that question of whether it affects fruiting or not.
Right.
But it is what it is. Okay, next slide.
We got plenty of examples of fruiting. I'm not worried about that. But
okay, so then it doesn't affect the fruiting process.
Yeah, absolutely. We again, most of the fruits and vegetables that we've tested this on are reporting between a 20 and 40% increase in yield. There are some crops like peppers and strawberries where we see 60, 70, 80, 100% increases in yield, and grapes seems to be our best crop. We routinely see 70 to 150% increases in yield on grapes. And ironically, the wine growers have told us they don't want anything to do with our technology because they're afraid that they're going to see a reduction in quality, which so far we haven't seen on the table side. So we're still working with a couple of wine growers to get their results, but so far we've had a couple of wine growers that said they have the best crop they've seen in years. So no worries there.
But that would be, I'm very surprised that the vineyard guys aren't paying attention, because if the table grape guys are getting results, that would show that the bricks are up, the flavors are there, the increase in yield, et cetera. It would not affect their end result. But hey, those guys can be a little crazy.
Well, those guys, they're just operating in fear because they have a very tightly controlled flavor profile and a very tightly controlled quality profile, and they don't want. They're very. I mean, when you do a trial with, I'm not going to say names, but one of the big growers that we're working with, for example, I mean, they have thousands of acres, but they're saying, okay, we're going to give you half of this 1 acre on this farm. It's just like, come on, you got 1,000 acres. Like, no. You have this half acre. If you show it here, then in 2 years we'll give you this 2 acre plot. And if you do it there, I'm like, so what you're telling me is in 50 years we'll have you as a complete customer. They're all like that. They're all so scared because they will not change their flavor profile unless it's a cheap, like a box wine or something. They don't care as much. But yeah, it's been a real challenge to get those guys to listen.
Yeah, I hear that. Sorry to interrupt, but these are questions that I know the audience is probably thinking about. So go ahead to your next slide.
So this is actually a test that I did in my backyard. Again, I like to garden and stuff. So I was growing wheatgrass because I was juicing at the time. So when we ran this, I noticed that I said, well, let me just do one with just the seeds and the same soil and everything else. And let me just water one with Kemenasi, right? And I just set them aside. And in 5 days, this was, I think, 6 days, I saw that the Kemenasi was, 20%, 30% higher with a lot more leaves. And I was about ready to harvest it. I showed a picture to Frank, our CEO. And I said, yeah, I'm about to harvest. I want to see how they taste. He said, no, you can't eat this. I said, why? He said, you need to take this to a lab. So we cut all the wheatgrass, put them in separate bags. We sent them to a lab for nutrient analysis. And it turns out, and that's what you see here, 6 times more iron, 3 times more potassium, more phosphorus, there was another one, I can't remember what it was. I think more protein. It had a lot more nutrient density than the untreated wheatgrass. And the same thing with the sprouts that we ran too. So I was really impressed because the whole reason I was juicing is to get that infusion of vitamins and minerals, right, that you get from wheatgrass, from juicing like that. And later on, I did test the crop, and it did taste a little bit sweeter and definitely more flavorful than the other untreated ones, for sure.
Did you add any compost tea to that?
No, it was an organic. It was an organic like fertilizer or organic potting soil that you get from Home Depot. And I used it for both. I figured it had enough, and I actually got probably 6 or 7 crops out of that soil before it started to slow down. So I wasn't really worried about adding compost tea because they already had enough nutrients. And when you're sprouting, the seeds have a lot of it anyway, so it doesn't necessarily need a ton because you're harvesting. You're not letting it go 30 or 40 days. You're harvesting in a week, so you don't necessarily need it as much. But I could definitely do that.
Because if you're getting increased mineral production, that is controlled by biological. So here again, I'm really starting to think that you are stimulating biology with this process. How can you not be with that?
Well, I mean, again, that exudase, those plants, especially wheatgrasses, is kind of a Swedish plant anyway. So it's that sugar exudase. When your photosynthesis is producing more of those glucose molecules, some of that is going to go back down into the soil through the roots because they're feeding that microbiology anyway. So we are definitely improving the microbial activity in that sense.
Yeah. I again can't put my finger on it, but that kind of is leading me to believe that the hypothesis that is you are doing something to a biology is just it's haunting you, dude. So anyway, all right, keep going. Sorry.
Well, we've actually run, we thought that too, and we actually talked to a microbial vendor, and he said that he didn't see, we actually tested this directly on his compost tea as microbial tea, or his liquid biological amendment. We just, without the plants there, and he said that there wasn't a significant difference. He said there were some differences, but he said he didn't notice any significant difference in microbial populations or anything with that experiment. And so, again, I don't know. I mean, that was one guy with one experiment. So it's quite possible in that ecosystem with plants and microbiology together that we are directly stimulating it. I'm not sure. It may just be, again, that structuring of the soil and the improvement of photosynthesis combination is helping that.
Well, if you can't get blood out of a stone. So if you're getting increased minerals and nutrients, there's more to it than just the fact that you're increasing the structure of the soil. But again, we're definitely going to be in touch. You know that on other projects. So we'll get to the end of that. We'll get to the bottom of that at some point in the future.
Sure.
Yeah. So all right, let's bring up the next slide.
This is it's actually a citrus grower here, and he also has a dragon fruit nursery. So this is a type of cactus. He sells these to Home Depot and Lowe's and a lot of the box chain stores, the garden stores. It used to take him 10 weeks to grow on a 5-gallon bucket from seedling, or he grows them from like 4 to 6 inch cuttings like this to full size. And he said that we basically cut his growth time in half. So we showed a picture at 5 weeks, what they look like with treated and untreated. And you can see, obviously, it's not just the size, obviously, but you can see it's a deeper green. It's much healthier looking, much stronger. Dragon fruit tends to be kind of spindly. It doesn't tend to get real wide and thick like that. But with our system, it does. It's a good indication. So
yeah, that's a happy friggin' plant.
Yeah, that's impressive. I actually wanted to get one, but I have to get some space to put them. I want to grow a few dragon fruit because I like dragon fruit, just the fruit. But yeah, and he turned us on to his supplier here in Florida, and now she's using it and getting great results on her farm too.
Has anybody tried banana plants? Has anyone tried to sell banana plants?
Yeah, we did a trial with a grower. It's actually a university down in Ecuador, and he was trying on banana seedlings, and he was saying that they were getting much faster growth rate and much better quality. And right now we're running some trials with a couple of banana growers down south in South America and also in Africa. In Kenya, they have a grower that's using it right now. So we're waiting for his results to see that.
There's a lot of disease pressure in those, in some of the more common varietals that we consume. So I wonder if
Sigatoka is probably the worst one. They're having it's becoming like a pandemic for the bananas, especially the Cavendish, the standard ones you see in the store.
So I'm wondering if this might benefit in that situation.
We would hope so. I mean, obviously, we have seen benefits in fungal resistance in a number of different crops. So it'd be interesting to see.
So you don't have any of those clients on the books at this point?
We do, but like I said, they're in the beginning stages, so we don't have results from them yet.
Got you.
So we're still waiting.
All right. Well, you're definitely coming back, my friend.
Well, the funny thing is, like, people ask me, well, what do you have in this? I'm like, well, we have this guy, and this guy, but he's only had it for 2 months. Unfortunately, with agriculture, generally, from the time you start to the time you get a result, it's like 3 to 6 months. So it's kind of a waiting game in a lot of cases. But and more so in getting the client to actually bite. It probably take a year to get them, and then Anyway, I get a lot of those guys I talked to last year. They were like, and they just decided now. And then I call them again this year. I'm like, okay, let's do it. So just the fact that I'm still around, I guess, is enough to convince them to.
That your technology is not all woo-woo and it actually has value.
Yeah, exactly. Woody center. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, well, it's getting hard. It's not as fruity.
Yeah,
it's hardening off. Go ahead.
This was an example of walnuts what we did, and they had a high electrical conductivity. You could see the salt damage on the picture on the left before we treated them. And just you can see the difference between the canopy and how much space there is, just how much empty space, mainly because of that salt poisoning. They just weren't really healthy. Bringing in the Kiminasi on the one on the right there. We reduced their water usage, which they were floored by almost half. Like that was pretty big. We reduced their soil compaction. They had a very compact, hard soil, and we reduced that compaction. And we increased their yield by 30%. So he was happy with that too, obviously.
And I love that reverse the salt toxicity, 100%.
Say that again, Ken.
Reverse salt toxicity, 100%. That one I found very fascinating.
Yeah, no, and salt is such a huge issue, whether it's built up or it's coming in on reclaimed water or even water now. So
Yeah, well, when you have to pump it out of the ground, especially the deeper you go, usually the more salt you pull up with that, it's more sodium. And the problem biologically is when plants have too much sodium, plants need potassium, nitrogen, and phosphorus, right? But if you have sodium, the plant will absorb the sodium molecule as opposed to the potassium molecule. And what salt poisoning really is, more often than not, is a potassium deficiency.
Yep.
And it becomes a real problem unless you're adding a lot of potash to sort of counteract that. It just happens to be that our technology is making the plant more resilient to those stresses and helps allow the plant to absorb what they need without having to.
All right, so here's $1 million question. In a soil that is potentially high, not quite sodic, but maybe 20% of the cation exchange capacity sites have been blocked by salt. Does it trick potassium and not salt? Like it does.
But our technologies, I honestly don't know the real answer to that and why that occurs. I honestly think that the reason why it has a benefit is because, again, we're reawakening and re-stimulating the microbial activity in the soil. Again, we can debate whether it's directly or indirectly, but the fact is the microbial populations are becoming more active. And I think that the microbial populations being more active start to break down the excess sodium in the soil and help flush it out so that they get flushed out into the waterways, etc. That's what I think is happening. And we have a few soil tests where we actually reduced the saline, the electrical conductivity, and the sodium concentration by about, I think it was 20 or 30%. It's pretty significant.
So you pushed it, you flushed it, you actually, because I've had this debate with a number of people over the years about sodium.
Microbes flushed it. Like I that's my theory. I don't really know why I don't understand exactly. I'm not an agronomist. I'm not a soil chemist. I don't really know the answer of why it happened. I'm just theorizing that by improving the microbial activity, improving the plant health, and that photosynthetic process, that we're somehow allowing the microbes to sort of do their work and flush out those toxic imbalances.
So again, whether it's flush out or prevent from uptake, that's kind of the question I'm trying to figure out. Is that is your product in a soil system that has a high sodium content, leaving the sodium on the cation exchange site and pulling up the potassium instead? In other words, in the leaf tissue or the sap, are you seeing a reduction in salt and an increase in potassium? Or is that something that you haven't really looked at yet? Well,
we've looked at it, but I'm going to use a diplomatic answer and say we need to collect more data. I'm going to be a politician for a minute.
Okay.
We'll give you that. No problem. In other words,
it's because we've seen soil tests where we're increasing potassium and we're decreasing sodium and electrical conductivity. We've seen other soil tests where there's not a significant difference in those things, or there's marginal difference one way or the other. So it's, I'm the kind of guy that before I want to make a definitive claim like that, then I want to know from the inventor that that's what's happening. But B, I'd like to have 100 or 200 soil tests where I can get a broad, okay, this is the average of what we're really doing. Because anybody can produce a result here or there. It's when you start seeing consistent results that you can make more definitive conclusions.
Right. Hence replication, why it's so important in science. But to back it up a little, when you saw those differences, was it a difference in organic and synthetic practices, or it didn't matter across both lines? When you
those were conventional farms, they weren't organic farms, as far as I know.
Okay. So, all right. That's significant right there, because in the synthetic, you're always going to get salt buildup. Yeah, you can't get away from it. That's the delivery method for the fertilizer. So, for you to get the increase in potassium and the decrease in sodium on the cation exchange cation sites, or in the sap, or in the leaf, that's a big win. That's a really big
win. Yeah.
Another slide, Ken.
So this is one of our university trials on corn. This was done in Ecuador, and you can see we had the researchers stand in front of it because they were growing 14-foot tall corn plants, or trees, as I like to call them. But they were growing these for forage. So a lot of what they were interested in is just overall weight of the plant. They weren't so much worried about the corn, but the overall increase in fresh weight was 72% over control. And they were averaging, I think, 1.5 to 2 ears per stalk. I think, or I said 3 ears there. So, yeah. So they were getting 2 on their untreated and 3 on the treated. So, but I think the treated were, not quite full size, but still, I mean, compared to what you'd normally see, just a huge difference. And so overall difference was about 72%. They normally get about 45 to 50 tons. And I think they got to 86 tons of green chop with our system.
And I'm assuming that was a synthetic grow as well.
That was organic, actually, I think.
So they were doing manures.
Yeah. I can't remember what they were using exactly, but we have the full university write-up and thesis on our website. Anybody can go check that out. It's up there. If you like to read 50 or 60-page scientific
white papers,
study articles, we have a few of them on our website. I think we still have to get a few more up there, but I know we got several up there already. So,
all right. Is there another slide?
Nope, that's it.
All right, and still no questions. I can't believe it. I figured we got.
I'm happy to answer. I don't bite, guys. If you have questions, let me know. I'm happy to answer.
Well, maybe it was just that they're kind of like reeling to try to understand what we're or what you've demonstrated and what you've basically presented, because it's significant, and to go back to the original woo-woo of it all. I'm sure people's brains are going to be spinning for a while, and then they'll formulate the questions because they're still trying to digest what we just said. Well, it looks like. Go ahead.
I was going to say, there's a quote that I like to put. I actually put it on some of my quotes when I send quotes out, and the quote is from Arthur C. Clarke, and it's one of his laws. It says, "Any sufficiently advanced technology will be indistinguishable from magic." Right. So, yeah, it seems too good to be true. It seems like it's magic, but it's really just an advanced technology, right? And so what we've done is essentially, and this is happening in the medical field too. A lot of people don't realize this, but in the medical field is going away from pharmacology and chemistry. It's happening slowly because there's a vested interest there, but there's a lot more like MRI machines and scanning tools, and they're using biophysical equipment to actually measure things and see things and be able to diagnose things. And this has happened even in plants for many years too, but where we've sort of crossed the gap or jumped over the cliff is we're able to use that same process of sensing and gathering data and enabling it to create a biofeedback loop that we can use that same technology to stimulate and to correct imbalances in various things. And so that really is the leap forward. Is not so much the frequencies or the harmonics or the physics or the technology of it. It's more of how do you take something that's been used from an analysis or a data gathering sensor type of a utilization to a transmission, and how do you create that feedback loop to correct something, right? And that's really where this technology and other technologies like it are really they're at that bleeding edge. But you're going to see this in the next 20 or 30 years, a lot more medical and agronomic and a lot of other technologies that are utilizing these precepts, because once people come to understand how much more efficient this approach is and how much less damaging it is to the environment, to ourselves, to the plants, etc. I mean, the benefits just so far outweigh the costs, and they're gonna come to that conclusion, hopefully sooner, but sooner or later.
Have you done any human consumption of the water?
It doesn't affect human consumption positively or negatively. I drink the water every day. It doesn't really change my physiology. There is a technology, again, this came from medical field. There is a technology where we attach this to an alkaline machine, like a Kangen style machine, right? Not a Kangen machine, but similar.
Yeah.
And it's a chip that sends frequencies that are designed to help your body absorb and utilize water more effectively. And it's a water technology for people, but it's different sets of frequencies and programming than what you'd see for our plant technology.
So you are actually working with some water companies then?
Yeah, we have a water company that we work with that and we don't. My company, Harvest Harmonics, doesn't distribute it, but the Kim and Aussie, they have their own distributors for that technology.
But they use your technology, or they've developed it?
The Kim and Aussie technology is a biophysical technology that has many different fields. Okay, so we have the Kim and Aussie plants technology. That's what we distribute and sell for the inventor.
Yep.
The inventor also has a medical technology, as I mentioned. He's got a medical clinic. He's got a water technology for human drinking. He's got many other technologies that I'm not even going to get into because I don't think they've been released yet. But he's got multiple technologies that are all based upon this biophysical concept, how he's able to handle various things.
In the water side or health side, is there a pH difference? Is he working with alkaline?
He works with an alkaline water machine. So I don't think the frequencies depend upon whether the water is, like I drink it with just a straight 0 pH or a 7 pH, where it's standard no treatment, but the machine itself has alkaline levels where you can step up and make alkaline water through the electrolysis. And either one of those, it doesn't really affect how the frequencies of the technology itself that he's adding to that, it doesn't affect that. But obviously, if you want an alkaline water for whatever purposes, kill free radicals, or if you want a more acidic for better digestion or whatever you would use the electrolysis aspect of the machine for, the Kim and Aussie is just stimulated the molecular or cellular absorption of that water. So it's a little bit, they work together, but they're not the same thing.
And where would we find that? Because all I've got is the Harvest stuff on here for in the description. Where would we find that unit?
Medical application.
You can go to Kim and Aussie, KYMINASI.com. If you go to KimandAussie.com, I mean, I think it's in Italian, but you can just click on your browser to translate it.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
He's in Italy, so, but he's got a diet program. He's got, like I said, a medical clinic. He's got, you can find all of his technologies on his website for that. Okay, I can't hear you, Leighton. I don't know if it's me or...
You're on mute, Leighton.
Oh, that's right. I see. I didn't want to blow your ears up. There's one last question, and that is, has anyone merged this with electroculture? Or are you familiar with electroculture?
I've heard of it. I really don't know much about it. So
electroculture goes along the theory of pulling energy ions from the atmosphere. So you basically take a copper wire, you wrap it around a twig, and you put some antenna up, and then you plant it, and you run that wire through your row crop, through your field, whatever. Basically, it's harvesting ions out of the atmosphere. And so my question is, and obviously if you've never heard of it, then you probably don't know anybody that's tried to merge these two technologies.
Maybe they have, and I don't know about it. I don't know. I mean, I haven't heard of it, so it's possible.
Yep. All right. Well, dude, we're definitely going to have you back on. I'm amazed at how far you've gotten since launching in 19 and then losing everything for 20. You bounced back pretty friggin' strong. It sounds like if you found home in 50 countries and multiple farms across the U.S. So obviously you've got a great team. How many employees are you working with?
We have, I'm trying to remember now. I think we have 10 or 12 core employees, and we have representatives. If we add the external representatives that work with us, probably another 50 or 60.
Wow.
So
that's how you're getting so much traction.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
We found out the hard way that boots on the ground is going to beat, as knowledgeable as I am and hopefully good at sales as I am, the farmer needs somebody to be there shaking his hand, and we found out that that's just a much more workable solution. So.
Yeah, tends to be. The old face-to-face is way more valuable than the phone call, for sure.
Right.
Was there anything else you wanted to add that I missed, or questions?
No, I mean, I think basically I would just say that, look, we work with any farmer. all the way from a garden device. Literally, if you have a garden or a lawn at home and you want to say, hey, I want to see if this thing can help my garden or my flowers or my house plants or whatever, we have a garden system that you can literally use and plug into your hose. And we go all the way up to massive commercial farms that can cover 500, 600 acres at a time, right? So if you're interested in improving your plants or your environment around you, or you want to do a test or something like that just to see how it works, definitely give us a call or go to our website, and we'd love to help you out.
Fantastic. And yeah, I was going to say, Ken, it definitely bring up a way for people to get in touch with him, as well as the company which you just brought up. That's fantastic. And I'll end it with, it's so funny that Ben reached out to you. And he's now demoing the tech at his home to see how well it works. So
yeah,
it's a small world.
He's like, I grow proteas. I'm like, what's that? He's like, it's this really special type of flower. I'm like, oh, do tell. And and I tell him the same thing. I tell everybody, because they always ask me, well, will this work on my crop? And because if I haven't happened to do their crop yet, I said, well, does your crop use photosynthesis? They say, yeah. I said, then our crop will help your crop. There's no plant that we've seen, unless it's a Venus flytrap or unless it's a fungus like a mushroom. I can't help you there, but otherwise, we can definitely help out.
Interesting. Now, I just recently watched a short on Paul Stamets in how drum circles used to stimulate mycorrhizae fungi, and by vibration, it's a lower vibration. So you may just not have found the right frequency for fungi. You have to look at real low frequencies to affect them. But I gotta believe that if it works on any plant, then it's got to work on Venus flytrap. I don't know why, but fungi, it should. It's probably just you have no right vibration. Yeah.
Well, Venus flytrap, it probably would work. It was kind of a joke because Venus flytraps get they kill the flies and they get their nutrients that way.
They still gotta have still gotta have a connection to the mycology around them. So. Or the ecosphere.
Maybe they will. Maybe our system will help those too. Who knows? I haven't come across the Venus flytrap grower, so who knows? No.
Well, they got to be out there, man. Maybe you should try to search one.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Ken. Are there any announcements you need to make? And I guess we'll wrap up a couple minutes early here.
Yeah, other than Jim, stick around for after we go off. But we have, of course, myself and Andy on Wednesday. I've got new on the R&D Grow probably tomorrow, guys. And then, of course, we've got the girls. Hopefully they're back. I know Luna was really sick, so hopefully they're back on Thursday. Next week, we have Stefan Burns, who is going to talk about electromagnetism and the Schumann resonance and a whole bunch of other stuff related to energy. So you guys are not going to want to miss next week. And other than that, Jim, unless you have something where I can shut off the broadcast.
No, it's all good. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Jim, thanks for coming on and giving us 2 hours of your time to really dive down a better understanding of this form. And Ken, thank you for all the hard work you do behind the scenes of putting this together. As always, much appreciated and much love to both of you guys.
Okay, and with that, guys, I'm going to end the broadcast, and we'll see you tomorrow on the R&D Grow.